All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's Dr. Ephraim. Today's date, January 13th, 2023. Counting it down for my birthday, man, the big 5-5, man, a privilege denied to many. And I'm so grateful and thankful to still be here, man, doing what I do by grace and mercy of the Most High. But yeah, welcome everyone. If you're new to the channel, even if you've been here for a while, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and select all. That way you'll be notified every time I upload a new presentation. I want to thank you all for your continued support and your engaging comments and liking the videos, and that all helps in the viewership. So I appreciate you all, and I definitely try to engage when I can and where it interests me. All right. But earlier I made a I don't know if it was today or it might have been yesterday, and I gave a shout out to the Aborigines, the original Australians, man, because a lot of them, uh, seem to think that they're Israel. Now, if you look at if you know their history, and I don't want to pre-teach the lessons, and I'm going to go into all that, but I could see how they could perceive that. I mean, with the whole uh, going into slavery on ships, yokes of iron on the neck. I mean, I'm serious. It's like really what they went through, it fits us so much. But here's the thing, and here's the beautiful thing about DNA. What people love and hate about it is profound as their story sounds in terms of lining up with scripture, the curses, right? Because the Aboriginal Australians went through a lot. They went through hell, man. That's why I gave them a shout out in terms of how they were treated, man. They were treated like they were animals. I tell you what, man. Sidebar, real quick. Um, the original Australians, the Aborigines, they are the oldest race of people on this earth, straight up. So, I mean, you can take that for what it's worth. They are the oldest race of people on this earth. And if you look at them, I mean, their features are extremely and very distinct. They have features of like a kind of kind of prime, what do you call it, Neanderthalish kind of. They got a real original look about them. They don't look like any other black people on earth. Put it like that. They don't. I mean, just stating the obvious. But their history, man, it really does sound a lot like Israel. Um, Now, can they be sojourners of Israel? No doubt, no doubt. Um, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. Knowing the haplotype of the children of Israel being E1B1A, that's one thing. But there's a lot of brothers and sisters, who come from the E1B1A line, from Jacob's line, that's not going to make it, man. I mean, it's just being real. So, the Most High said he would see you as one that is homeborn if you take up the law, statutes, and commandments given to the children of Israel. That's what Christ meant when he said salvation is of the Jews. That's what you have to do for salvation. He didn't say salvation is of me. He didn't say I'm your savior. He didn't say that. And John 4:11 says, he said out of his own mouth, salvation is of the Jews. So, yeah, anyway, not getting into that too much, but you know, I empathize with the Aborigines. I really do. I find them a fascinating study, to be honest. And but to get back to the point I was making, their DNA outs them as not um, Jacob. I mean, they existed. They existed long before Jacob. So I mean, for them to kind of claim Jacob, like what? Y'all was here way before Jacob. I mean, I ain't gonna get into that, but I mean, I'm saying they are the oldest race of people on this earth. So, anyways, I want to go ahead and get into the lesson, man, about because it's really fascinating to me. Shout out to all our Aboriginal brothers and sisters out there, man. My prayers are with you all. I'm saying Shabbat Shalom to all of you. You know, and my thing is, man, listen, man, if you're strong enough to stand with Israel, I accept you. Who am I? You understand what I'm saying? You know, the Most High says that I love them that love me. And I stand on that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into this lesson, man. And let's look at what the DNA says about our Aborigine brothers and sisters over there in Australia, who seem to think a lot of them still really hold that they're Israel. But DNA, like I said, people hate it and love it because when DNA gets involved, man, it will reveal the truth. Now, the thing is, a lot of people don't like the truth, so they kind of buck against it. You can buck against it all you want to, but your DNA is what it is, man. I mean, it's going to tell you the truth, so it's no different here. But shout out to them, man. See, I'm going to get on with the lesson, man. So until tomorrow, which is my birthday, I'm debating whether I should even speak, tomorrow or whatever the case may be. But I don't know. I probably will, you know. But we'll see. We'll see. So until then, man, you all take care. And this is Dr. Ephraim signing off.
The history and the status of the Aborigines, or what they call, or they're sometimes called the original Australians. Now, I actually got a chance to actually see, meet, and mingle with some Aborigines back when I served active duty in the United States Navy. That's one of the best things about the Navy. I enjoyed. I got to see a lot of the world, a lot of different cultures, and got paid to do so. And so with that, we were in as a small, I don't know if you call it a small city, state, or whatever, but it's called Cairns, or Cairns, Cairns, Australia. That was the first port we hit. And that I had the opportunity to actually see up close and personal some Aborigines. And of course, up to that point, I'd heard about them, kind of, seen them here and there on like National Geographic or something like that. But and had I not been active duty in the Navy at the time, I doubt very seriously I would have ever had the opportunity to actually see, mental, and mingle and talk to some. And other than their appearance is very pronounced. And I have a personal theory on that and a personal hypothesis on why that is. Before we even get into that, the DNA aspect of the Aborigines and their history, I think it's important to note that, well, first of all, many of them actually believe themselves to be one of the lost tribes of Israel. Now, when I first heard that, and I was like, oh God, here another group of people trying to lay claim to, being an Israelite. Well, upon further investigation, I mean, I was like blown away by their history, and once I did that, once I was able to really dig into their history, then it came to my understanding why they would feel that way, and we're gonna get into that as well. But I find these people to be very fascinating because clearly, well, first of all, they look like they originated, somewhere in Africa, in which they did. Yet their features are so different, and so pronounced than Hamitic Africans or even people that look like us, or Negroes, or whatever you want to call it. Aborigines clearly have a distinct look to themselves, and we're going to get into that. So strap up. I don't know how long this presentation is going to be, but it's a couple different moving parts I want to address and give a little subtext to the context, but it's very important, and we're going to actually look at and see why many of them actually believe that they're lost children of Israel. And when I finish with this presentation, you're going to be like, wow, like the same as I was when I started like doing the research or whatever. So anyway, that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. And here we go. The source for this particular segment in this presentation is from National Geographic, specifically Miss Maya Owe Haas. And this article was published August 22nd, 2018. And I think this is important because it kind of adds some subtext to the context, but at the same time, it kind of verifies what my personal theory was about the Aborigines. Apparently, this ancient girl's parents were found to have be from two different human species by their DNA. Now, to many of you who aren't very up on the whole historical DNA and the genome of trying to map in sequences of Neanderthals and Denisovans, which were two different groups of quote unquote human beings or whatever, human species. The reason why this find is so I guess amazing, for lack of a better word, is that for a long time, we have proof that these two groups existed, but we didn't know that they actually interbred. Well, they found the DNA on a girl who has the DNA of both a Neanderthal and a Denisovan. And so let me read a little bit from that, and then we'll talk about it. And it says, when the results first popped up, paleogeneticist Vivian Sloan didn't believe it. Quote, "What went wrong?" she recalls asking herself at the time. Her mind immediately turned to the analysis. Did she make a mistake? Could the sample be contaminated? The data was telling her that roughly 90,000-year-old flake of bone she had tested was from a teenager that had a Neanderthal mom and a Denisovan dad. Researchers had long suspected that these two groups of ancient human relatives interbred, finding whiffs of both their genes in ancient and modern human genomes, but no one had ever found the direct offspring from such a pairing. The landmark find, published this week in Nature, marks the first definitive evidence for offspring that came directly from interbreeding of these ancient species and is helping shape our understanding of hominin interactions. Quote, "It's amazing to be able to find something like this," says David Reich, a geneticist at Harvard who was not part of the work. "It seemed unlikely that we would be able to catch it happening in the act, an individual that's really the product of a first-generation hybrid." So, who was this ancient child, and what does her fossil mean for our understanding of the human journey? Who were the Denisovans? Denisovans are a fairly recent and still largely mysterious addition to our understanding of the human family tree. In 2010, an international team led by Svante Pabo of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology announced the discovery of unusual hominin DNA from a pinky bone and wisdom tooth found in the Denisova cave of Siberia in Atlay Mountains. They named this newly described hominin Denisovan after the cave. Further studies showed that the Denisovans were a sister group of the Neanderthals, splitting from a common ancestor some 390,000 years ago. They likely lived until around 40,000 years ago, around the time when Neanderthals were also starting to fade away. Now, I'm going to stop there. Let me just say this. Now, I gave that little piece right there on the genetic find of the girl having the DNA of a Neanderthal and Denisovan, who were human species, and the thing about it is we know that these things existed, right? Because we have the fossils, we have the bones, we have the so we knew that they existed. The thing is, there's always going to be a bunch of questions. Well, how long ago it was, how old the Earth is, all this stuff. People will be debating that for forever. There'll never be a definitive answer, because I believe it's like that on purpose. The Most High doesn't want us to figure everything out. He just doesn't. And so, we probably have more questions than answers, and I believe that is by design. But that's the one beautiful thing about DNA. I mean, you could take it, test it, map it, and the thing about it is you can carbon date whatever, and still you're not gonna, it's not gonna provide the answers a lot of us are looking for. But I wanted to speak to that because that actually lines up with my personal hypothesis and belief on the Aborigines. I believe them to be a relic, if you will, of our past, and I'm going to tell you what DNA says about them. I'm going to deal with that in the next segment about the Aborigines. They're actually older than us, the Negroes, the Hamitic groups of Africanic people. They're older than us, and again, that lines up too, because then if they're older than us and by a wide margin, they can't. I believe they came from a group of people that didn't look like me and you per se, right? But yet they're black. You look at their features and they had afros. They're dark skinned. They're even with the nose and certain features. But Aborigines have clearly pronounced features that you can't mistake a Negro for an Aborigine, and vice versa, or even a Hamitic African. You just can't. They stand out. And so I believe them to be a somewhat of a hybrid, if you will. I don't know if Neanderthal or this Denisovan species they're talking about, but I believe them to really be a relic of that, kind of in some way. Now I don't know that to be genetically or scientifically true. That's just my personal belief, and because you could see it in their features. You could just look at them, right? And their features are clearly pronounced, and they're different than ours. Yet they came from the same continent. They're still black people. And so we're gonna the next segment is going to deal with mapping the. I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, we're going to deal with what the DNA says about the Aborigines, or the quote unquote original Australians. And when I get into that, and then the next segment after that, I'm going to deal with why a lot of them feel and think that they are from one of the lost tribes of Israel. And once we get into that, you'll be like, oh wow, okay. All right, so DNA study finds Aboriginal Australians world's oldest civilization. And this, I'm citing the sources of history.com. And it says, the newly published paper is the first extensive DNA study of Aboriginal Australians, according to the University of Cambridge, working in close collaboration with Indigenous Australian elders and leaders. An international team of researchers obtained permission to extract DNA from the saliva of 83 Aboriginal Australians and 25 Papuans from New Guinea and sequence their complete genetic information. While some scholars have theorized that indigenous Australians descended from a separate, earlier migration than that of Eurasian people, the study's authors report that the majority of non-Africans stem from a single ancestral group of migrants who left Africa approximately 72,000 years ago and eventually spread across the other continents. While European and Asian ancestral groups became distinct in the genetic record around 42,000 years ago, the researchers say that occurred even earlier, approximately 58,000 years ago, in the case of indigenous Papuan and Australian ancestral groups as they ventured eastward. And it said, quote, our results suggest that rather than having left in a separate wave, most of the genomes of the Papuans and the Aboriginal Australians can be traced back to a single, quote, out of Africa event which led to modern worldwide populations, said Mihinder Sandhu, a senior author from the Sanger Institute and University of Cambridge. Quote, there may have been other migrations, but the evidence so far points to one exit event. And they say around 50,000 years ago, the wave of migration reached Sahul, a prehistoric supercontinent composed of present-day Australia. Right? It says the study also found that Aboriginal Australians and Papuans diverged from each other about 37,000 years ago, although the reason is unclear because the water separation between New Guinea and Australia had yet to be completed. The researchers theorized the break could have been attributed to early flooding of the Carpentaria Basin that left Australia connected to New Guinea by only a narrow, impassable strip of land. And then it goes on to say that scholars have long been flummoxed as to why the language spoken by 90% of Australia's Aboriginal people is relatively young, approximately 4,000 years old, according to language experts, if their ancestors had occupied the continent so much earlier. One possible answer has been that a second migration into Australia by people speaking this language occurred around 4,000 years ago. Now, why is that significant? Because 4,000 years ago, that was the whole Bantu expansion. Okay, all right. That was when the whole Bantu expansion, which we found out and uncovered that Bantu expansion was actually a Hebrew expansion. So, quite, it'll raise an eyebrow that they believe that this migration of these Aboriginals, and the language started around 4,000 years ago. So keep that in mind. Let's see here. One other notable finding from the DNA of the Aborigines study is evidence of an uncharacterized hominid group there we go, that interbred with modern humans as they migrated through Southeast Asia on their way to Australia. And that lines up with my personal belief and hypothesis in terms of where the Aboriginal people stem and descended from. According to the study, around 4% of the Aboriginal Australian genome comes from this unknown human relative. See, there we go. That's the key point right there. You say that again. According to the study, around 4% of the Aboriginal Australian genome comes from this unknown human relative. And quote, someone said, "We don't know who these people were, but they were a distant relative of Denisovans, an extinct human species," right? And the Papuan Australian ancestors probably encountered them close to Sahul. So that lines up perfectly with my personal hypothesis and belief in terms of, who the Aborigines are and where they came from. They're, as a race of black people, they're older than us. They are, right? And that's a genetic fact. So before I get into the next segment, which I'm going to deal with why they feel they are a lost tribe of Israel, I thought it was important to provide that subtext about their DNA history, right? Because what happened was, and I'm going to go ahead, and this is a nice segue into the next segment of why they feel and many of them feel and think that they are from they are a lost tribe of Israel. Because if you go back to the curses, right? The curses said the children of Israel, you know them because they're going to go back into slavery by way of ships, right? Well, guess what? How did the Aborigines get from where they were in Africa to Australia? They were pretty much on ships. As a matter of fact, let me read a little piece right here real quick. Okay, and many of our very own people from our side believe that they're Israel just based on the curses, right? So that being said, Scripture tells us that the children of Israel are going to go into slavery by way of ships. Well, it says here that the Aboriginal origins, humans are thought to have migrated to northern Australia, which would be the original Australians or the Aborigines, from using primitive boats. A current theory holds that those early migrants themselves came out of Africa about 70,000 years ago, which would make Aboriginal Australians the oldest population of humans living outside of Africa. Look at that. So let's pause and frame that real quick. So they were going to, the children of Israel, we were going to know because they were going to go back into slavery by way of ships. That's one. Now, I can't show the images because I don't want to get the video flagged. But the Aborigines literally fit the majority of what we went through, the curses, to a T. I mean, really. And so I'm going to get into that into the next segment in terms of how the Europeans who arrived in Australia, how they subjugated them and colonized them and had them literally with yokes of iron on their neck. Like, I mean, it's I'm telling you, I never knew any of this before I really dug deeper into the Aborigines. Their history lines up perfectly with what the Bible says the children of Israel or our people was going to go through and what we went through. So that would explain a lot why a lot of them would think that they're a lost tribe from the children of Israel, right? And again, like I said, I'm not going to put any pictures up of them with yokes of iron on their neck, but you guys can do a quick Google search, and there's plenty of photos with Aborigines enslaved with yokes of iron on their neck. I'm just not going to, because I don't want to get the video tagged. But on to the next segment. And so, my thing is, as far as the on ships thing, if you look at it, how they got from where they were in Africa to Australia, on these boats, or they could be, referred to as ships or whatever. They were on ships, but they weren't on our ships. They were On the, they definitely were on boats and stuff, but they weren't on the boats that the children of Israel were on. But again, this is very fascinating because their story lines up almost to the letter of what the Bible said that the children of Israel were going to go through. So I could realistically see why many of them would think that they are Israelites by the curses, because many of our people think that they're Israelites by the curses. But I don't want to go on a tangent, but let me go over this real quick in terms of how they were colonized by the European Australians. And this source is from welcometothe.country.org. January 2nd, 2022 is copyright date. And again, I'm not going to include any pictures of them with yokes of iron on their neck because they're in abundance on the internet. Though, just do a quick Google search and you could see it, but I'm not going to post that. And it says, despite attempts by many Australians and even politicians to gloss over the colonization of Australia, there's no denying the treatment of Aboriginal people in Australia that continues on today. Wow. And then again, I shouldn't surprise because look at our people, the way our people are still being treated today here in America. Let's be honest, man. Let's be real. Come on. From the earliest years of invasion, there are countless stories of massacres handed down from generation to generation, and there are settlers' records found in old journals and letters that give grave insights into those early years. Some of the worst crimes against humanity happened right there in Australia. Complete communities wiped out by gunfire, herded off cliffs, burned alive, poisonings, the use of strychnine, which is widely regarded as one of the most excruciating ways to die. Wow. Sadly, politicians get away with their efforts to gloss over the early treatment of Aboriginal people. Australia's education system also does little when it comes to highlighting these atrocities. Does that sound familiar? You see what I'm saying? Anzac Day still admits the documented frontier wars, even though the war memorial states that the day is about remembering all wars. Something far less easier to hide and gloss over is a trove of images from around the turn of the century, a time when Australia was supposedly, quote, young and free, end quote. But these images show that life for Aboriginal people was more about incarceration and slavery. In recent years, Indigenous Facebook pages have been trying to share these images with the international community. However, our voices often fall upon deaf ears. Many of the following images contain images of Aboriginal men and children in chains, who were often chained up by the neck and sent, yokes of iron in the neck, and sent to the Aboriginal concentration camps. Again, I'm not going to post those images, but they exist. They're out there. And it said the oppression continues today. In recent years, the United Nations have handed down multiple scathing reports of Australia's lack of effort when it comes to improving the shocking rates of suicide, incarceration, health, and education. Australia doesn't even bother responding to these reports anymore. There is no pressure for them to do so. They have created the perfect stranglehold on our existence as they try to force us to assimilate into their toxic and destructive society. And just when you think Australia could do no worse, today they even choose the date of British invasion, January 26th, to celebrate, Australian Day. And this is why hundreds of thousands of us hit the streets each year in protest. Listen, and end quote for that article I just read. I had no idea of any of that. So I'm teaching myself here as well. I had no idea. I really didn't. And again, like I said, I could see, given the fact that what Scripture tells us the children of Israel were going to go through in terms of the curses, the Aborigines fit that to a T. They do, and no, not lost on me is that y'all do realize that that Britain is still the head of, I guess, the quote unquote head of state for Australia, right? So when people were kind of protesting, have things to say when Queen Elizabeth died, the masses couldn't understand why there was such pushback. Like British colonization wasn't a thing, and still a thing, really, right? To an extent. So that really gave me a lot of insight on why they actually would think that they are a lost tribe from the children of Israel. But we know that it's a little deeper than that. Yes, they do fit the curses. I mean, there's no denying that, man. I mean, they went through a lot. It's still going through a lot, as is our people, as is all pretty much dark people around the world. However, when it comes to the chosen seed, or the children of Israel, the Most High is very distinct in that. And I'm not trying to take away from what they went through, their experiences or anything like that. And my heart and my prayer goes out to them and the Aboriginal people. But what I'm saying is that in terms of the children of Israel are God's chosen nation, it's very specific in where those children came from. And in order to be a child of Israel, like by DNA, by genetics, you had to have come from the loins of Jacob, period, point blank. And you all know I've covered this ad nauseum. Jacob was one man, and yes, he gave his 12 sons, which ended up being the 12 tribes of Israel, different variations of his E1B1AY DNA haplotype. The fact is, you have to have come from one of those 12 that came from Jacob's loins, or Israel. His name changed to Israel. So it's not just the curses, which again, I'm not taking nothing away from what they went through, and I'm not even saying it from like an emphatic, I know this to be true, whatever, because only the Most High truly knows. But I only know that by my knowledge and understanding of genetics and being a chosen seed, right? You have to have come from Jacob's loins, period, point blank, right? And so their DNA, I believe Aborigines are in haplogroup C, if I'm not mistaken. That's the haplogroup they fall in, which of course C comes well before E, which is our haplogroup. So that also signifies that their DNA, their genetic existence is older than us. But it also kind of further makes the point that there's no way they can genetically be Israelites, because there's no way that they came from the seed of Jacob, right? And so for the people listening to this that aren't familiar with my teachings, no, we don't have the bones of Jacob or whatever. What we do have is scripture, and what we do have is the curses, and what we do have is the Negroes that were on those ships that went back into slavery, the children of Israel. That's what we do have. So by virtue of that, if we believe, and we believe that we went into those, we went back into slavery on those ships during the transatlantic slave trade. And if we believe that, and our DNA is E1B1A L3E, then we have to know and believe that was Jacob's DNA if we are the children of Israel. There's no other way around that. You can't believe one and not the other. You have to believe that. If you believe, and I don't care if you're a detractor of DNA, if you believe that we're the children of Israel, well, guess what? We have a DNA, man. Okay, everyone does. There's no way around it. Just like we all have distinct fingerprints, we all have DNA. So you can't believe that the Negroes all over the world in America are the children of Israel, and not believe that it's E1B1A, because that's what we are. So if you believe that we're the children of Israel and our DNA is E1B1A, well, common logic would tell you that hasn't been Jacob's DNA. It's as simple as that. You can't believe one without the other. So from that standpoint, I don't believe that. I believe that excludes them from being genetic Israelites. But in terms of will they somehow fall up under maybe the tents of Shem somehow? Or I can't speak to that. I don't know. I can't speak to that emphatically, nor will I do that. But what I will say, and I'm going to end on this note, is that it's a little deeper than just the curses. Okay, you have to have come from the seed and the loins of Jacob to be a child of Israel. All right, we're not talking grafting in and all that. That's a whole different thing. Everyone has a chance at salvation by taking up the law, statutes, and commandments of the children of Israel. And if those Aborigines are doing that by virtue of their belief in them being the children of Israel, I believe that the Most High will have mercy upon them, and they will pretty much ride with us, the children of Israel, if they really feel in their hearts that they are, and they're living they're taking up the law, statutes, and commandments that the Most High gave the children of Israel, then by all means, they will be returned unto the Most High as well. So God blessed all the Aborigines and all their descendants, and like I said, they went through hell. They went through pure hell and still going through it, like many of our people, just being honest. But anyway, that explains why they believe that they are a lost tribe of Israel. I never knew that. I really did before I did this presentation, so it taught me something too. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Wasn't too bad, wasn't too long, right up under 30 minutes, but very much worth it. And I had to give subtext to the context with their DNA, the history, how they got here, into Australia and all that kind of stuff, the colonization. So I addressed everything. So that being said,
Until the next presentation, this is Dr. Ephraim signing off, saying Shalom, elect.